Welcome, everybody, to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. Adam Azer here with Heath Cummings and Jamie Eisenberg. We are talking about tight ends today. It is our tight end position preview, and this is a position that, I don't know about often, but not infrequently gives us a top 5 finisher that was drafted in round 10 or later, including the number 1 tight end last year, number 3 per game, Sam LaPorta. So who's that going to be? Is it going to be somebody this season? Is that going to happen? Heath Cummings, take a guess. Round 10 or later, who's going to be a top 5 tight end?
It's the name that Jamie and I are hoping we get to go first on sleepers because we both like the same guy. It's Pat Freiermuth. It's, you just want to target a guy in an Arthur Smith offense. We've said that for many years now. Smith's Falcons had a 34% tight end target rate last year. Freiermuth's the clear number 2 option on the team. Somehow his ADP is still in round 13. Go get him.
Okay. Jamie, how about you? Give me a different name. You have to.
I'm a little excited about Dallas Goedert, and I know that's not something that we've said a lot lately, but I think Kellen Moore's offense is going to help him because they'll throw more in the red zone. And for tight ends to be, I think, start worthy, there has to be some level of touchdown production, unless you're going to be Trey McBride and just be uber targeted and the focal point of the offense. I don't think he's going to be that to the same level he was last year, but not far off. But that's a different story. But for Goedert, I think given the offense and how they operate with the 2 receivers and even the addition of Saquon Barkley, he's not going to be first or second in targets, which is something that we usually covet. But I still think this is going to be a better passing, not a more efficient, but a little bit more volume in the passing game for the Eagles. And I think that will benefit Goedert to the point where he feels a little bit safer than he did a year ago when I think he was being overdrafted as one of those top 6 tight ends.
Yeah, you can get him as tight end 12-ish, Dallas Goedert. And, Jamie mentioned first or second in targets on a team. That is so important. Last year, I think 12 of the top 13 tight ends in fantasy were first or second on their team in targets. The only one who wasn't was Taysom Hill. Almost every tight end that's finished in the top 5 over the last 8 or 10 seasons, or I don't forget how long I've been tracking it, is 1 or 2 on their team in targets. So it's a big deal, and it may not happen for Goedert. But I actually also came away just this morning, just kind of doing some added research. Let me look into Dallas Goedert a little bit more. I also came away a little bit more optimistic. He had been in 21 and 22 so efficient. The most efficient tight end in football, Kittle-esque, even better. He has to get back to being more efficient than he was last year. I don't know if he's going to be that efficient, but he has to be better than he was last year. If he can bounce back, because he's been on pace for right around 100 targets since the Zach Ertz trade in 2021. 97 targets after the Ertz trade in 2021. He averaged over 11 points per game. 2022, 98 targets he was on pace for. He averaged, I think, he had 11.7 points per game. And then last year, he was on pace for 105 targets, but just didn't do much with it. Other problem with Goedert, 8 end zone targets in the last 3 seasons. That is horrible. They don't throw to him. He doesn't run routes near the goal line. That's been under the old regime. Let's hope Kellen Moore fixes that. And those are all my Dallas Goedert notes. Okay. How about this? We'll get into this a little bit later, but over the last 5 seasons, there have been 27 tight ends selected in rounds 4 through 7. 5 to 6 tight ends every year go in rounds 4 through 7. And this is usually tight ends 3 through 8 or so in ADP. Only 6 of those 27 have actually finished in the top 5. 8 of them have finished in the top 6. 6 of them have met or exceeded their ADP in terms of they were drafted as tight end 4. They finished as tight end 4 or better. Only 6 of them out of 27. I don't know why, Heath. This is a black hole. You talk about the RB dead zone. This is the tight end dead zone. Wasn't so bad last year, but historically a bad spot for tight ends.
Which is why if you have a pick at the end of the 3rd round, you need to make sure you take your tight end before the turn and not after the turn. Because if you take them in round 3, they're going to be great. But if you take them in round 4, you're in trouble. No, I think this is why Jamie coined the phrase "great or late." These middling and there's certainly some bust options in that range again this year. One guy who's I think been a bust 2 years in a row in that spot. Kyle Pitts,
Yeah.
right in that range. Dalton Kincaid's been pushed way up into that range without yet doing anything that actually justifies it. The interesting thing is it seems like there's almost always one of Andrews or McBride that falls into round 4. I've got all 3 of those guys right at the 3-4, or all 4 of those guys right at the 3-4 turn. And kind of my strategy has been to draft the one that falls into round 4. It seems like, I think it's maybe like what it has been is there's usually been a couple of 3 tight ends in the first 3 rounds, and then there's a tier break, and then there's the middling tight ends, and then there's the late guys. I think that the top 4 have now fallen maybe a round. So I still wouldn't consider Andrews and McBride in that 4 through 7 problem. It's the guys, the tier behind them.
All right. Last year, TJ Hawkinson went in round 4. He was great. George Kittle went in round 5. He was good enough. He was tight end 6. He was drafted as tight end 5, I think. Darren Waller was a bust. Kyle Pitts was a bust. Dallas Goedert was a bust. Evan Ingram was a steal. So better, once upon a time, we had Vance McDonald going in this range. We had OJ Howard. We had Hunter Henry. Tyler Higbee coming off that big finish. We had 6 games where he was the best tight end in football history in 2019. So Logan Thomas was in this range. Noah Fant was in this range. Seeing Mark Andrews there. What's that?
Who's who?
I know, but I'm just wondering, are we going to be saying that in 3 years about Dalton Kincaid? Are we going to be saying that about Kyle Pitts? Are we going to be saying that?
Look, Pitts probably fits the mold of that if he, based on what his track record has been, which is why people are either going to be all in or all out. That's kind of just the nature of, I think, what he is. With the other guys in this range, like you're looking at Kincaid, and he feels like he belongs in the first group if you're of the belief that he's going to be a prime target for Josh Allen because he fits the bill. Good rookie campaign. First or second on the team in targets. If not by a wide margin, he could be first. And so, there's a lot to like about his situation. And I think, I'm assuming you're putting Kittle in this range. Kittle and Ingram. They have a resume, so it's not exactly, something you have to fear.
Well, technically Andrews is in this range too. And he certainly has a resume. He's been a top 5 tight end per game in 5 straight seasons. In I think non and half PPR, he's been top 3 per game in 4 of the last 5 seasons. That is Mark Andrews. Although we did get a report that Isaiah Likely is going to have a bigger role this year. So we'll see if that matters to you guys. By the way, something about Dalton Kincaid. I don't know how I didn't see this until this morning. He had an explosive play on 8.8% of his targets. That is absolutely awful. And I want to completely ignore it, but man, it really sticks out. I mean, that is one of the worst among all tight ends. And that's got to change. But I went back, I looked at the tight ends that have become really good, who had quiet rookie seasons, Kelce, Andrews, Kittle, a lot of them. None of them were. I haven't seen a tight end have a explosive, a really good tight end have an explosive play rate that bad, even as a rookie. So
I want to say that was Adam Azer that said that, and not me. I've been getting a lot of hate mail from Bills fans because of saying things about Josh Allen and Dalton Kincaid other than they're incredible. I think that lack of explosive rate shows up. They used him in a way of a lot of stuff around the line of scrimmage. His ADOT was 6.
Yes.
And he also didn't really do anything after the catch. 4.3 yak per reception.
I compared him to other tight ends who had similar ADOTs, and it was still very low. Evan Ingram also had a very low explosive play rate with a similarly low ADOT, but better than Kincaid's. All right, we got a lot more tight end. I haven't even gotten your overall strategy at tight end or the players that you like. I'm going to ask you about that momentarily. We have a lot of other podcasts that you should be listening to, including Heath's Dynasty podcast. Go to cbssports.com/podcast. We've got fantasy baseball. We've got golf. We've got soccer. We've got Beyond the Arc, a basketball podcast. We're talking about the Olympics right now. The basketball team. So check it out, cbssports.com/podcast. Now, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, boy, do I have a great offer for you. Use the bonus code FANTASY, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. So here's how it works. You download the BetMGM app, sign up using the bonus code FANTASY. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. You will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use the bonus code FANTASY when you sign up. That is FANTASY on BetMGM. Download that app right now. We'll be right back with the rest of our tight end preview after this.
Well, you need your sports news anywhere?
We've got breaking news to bring you.
Then get your sports anytime you want them. Big trade news overnight to discuss.
Because we know you need sports all the time.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
A legend adds to their legacy.
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
CBS Sports HQ, anywhere, anytime, all the time.
So let's get to your strategies. Jamie, you can start. What's your overall tight end strategy?
I will certainly take one of the first 4 tight ends at a discount. And I think a good place to look in how we approach tight ends, probably as a site, is our pick by pick series, which you have to go through each story, but it's certainly worth it, especially if you don't know where your draft position is yet. But you can see how we kind of played the board a little bit, which is, I think, the smart way to approach it. Like, nobody reached for Kelce or LaPorta. Kelce went first. It was in round 3. LaPorta was also in round 3. And then in round 5, starting with, I think it was Trey McBride, but McBride, Andrews, and Kincaid all went in round 5. I reached a little for Kincaid, but I was going 0 RB, as we discussed earlier this week with pick number 7. I did not expect him to come back to me in round 6. But in any event, if you can get McBride or Andrews in round 5, that's an absolute bargain, in my opinion, based on what those guys are both capable of doing. In any event, if I get the top 4 guys at a bargain, I'll do it. I'll reach a little bit for Kincaid, but not too much, again, unless I'm doing something specific. And then if I miss on those guys, again, it kind of goes down to what the price tag is for Pitts, Ingram, and Kittle, not necessarily in that order. Again, I'll take one of those 3. And then if I just miss on those guys, I'm looking for Ferguson, Goedert, or Freiermuth.
Heath, strategy?
If any of the big 4 fall into round 4, I take them there. If I take a guy in the middle, it's probably Kittle. And if not, like, does Jake Ferguson fall? I like him quite a bit if he's after, like, in the round 9-ish range, or I'll just take Freiermuth in the double-digit rounds.
Okay. Yeah. So do you agree with my sentiment that there just aren't as many fallback options? There aren't as many Freiermuths as.
Well, I think, like, one of the things I was going to bring up, like, we've had this tongue-in-cheek joke for 6 or 7 years that this is the year that tight end is deep. And I've kind of heard people saying that, and ironically, this summer, that, like, you don't have to go take a tight end early because there's so many good tight ends. And I still mostly think the position's terrible.
I completely agree. Who the heck is saying that, and why?
I think it's not necessarily deep. I think it's a little bit more balanced, though.
Oh, yeah.
And, like, if, again, you're asking those guys in the middle to, hold their own, and not be bust or flop. And that's, going back to what I said, those guys have a resume, where you can sort of say, okay, I know what I'm getting from Kittle, even though his points per game have declined every year of the last 5 years. I think I know what I'm getting in Ingram based on his role on this team where he just had 100+ catches. I hope what I'm getting in Pitts, but that's not the same situation, So I kind of feel like that's where it is. It's, usually it was almost like if you didn't get one of the top 1, 2, or 3 guys, let's just say, then it was a guessing game. Like, I don't feel like it's a guessing game through. You can even throw Njoku in there. We don't really talk about him because I think all of us collectively are a little bit nervous, but, like, you know what you're getting. And so that's, I think, where maybe that sentiment comes from. The other part of it is, if like you said, Adam, there's not a lot of fallback options. I don't know if I necessarily agree that. I agree that there's not a lot of safe fallback options, but I do think that there are some very intriguing fallback options that you probably just take a couple swings, and this you just have to commit yourself to taking 2.
Can you give me a couple examples after?
Well, I mean, we haven't said Brock Bowers' name yet, and he's gonna, I think, start to slip.
He's a top 12 guy, though. I mean,
I think he is now, but I think as more drafts start to happen, he'll go anywhere from tight end 10, I think, to tight end 15.
Why? Who's going to jump him? Like, is Dalton Schultz going to draft? I don't think Freiermuth or Schultz or Komet are going to.
I would not be surprised if Freiermuth jumped him in our ADP.
Yeah, I don't know. I Komet, like, that's the thing. Like, Schultz and Komet could be 2 good options, but both of them, obviously, their situations got worse.
Oh, I'm not saying that they're safe, but again, you're taking 2 swings at it, and so, like, and it's funny that just popped up in the chat. I was going to say earlier, when you asked about sleepers, Tyler Conklin, somebody that I take almost in a lot of drafts where I draft the second guy.
Yeah.
You said it before on what previous show, 87 targets, 3 straight years. Now he's getting 87 potential targets from Aaron Rodgers in an offense that may not have a good second receiver. Mike Williams coming off an ACL. We don't know when he'll be ready. Malachi Corley's getting a lot of love, but he's still a rookie. Like Conklin could be a very safe option, like a poor man's Ferguson, which isn't awful. Luke Musgrave, we saw what the tight end position was last year for the Packers. Whether it was Musgrave or Kraft, that was basically like 10 PPR points per game. That's safe. If that's
I know, but what are we talking about here? We're talking about streamers. We're talking about guys that you're not.
But what? No, you said fallback.
Yeah, but you consider them a fallback. Like if I miss on one of my top 9 guys, like, you know what? That's fine. I'm just going to wait for Freiermuth. Yeah, but took him. Okay, I'm fine with Tyler Conklin. No way. You don't want to go into
no, but that's what I'm saying. Like you have to take 2. And so again, the reason you're going fallback or streamers is because you missed or you waited too long. And so you have to have some plan. And so yes, it's not the ideal situation. You got to hope that you hit on your other positions and tight ends sort of irrelevant for you, or you get to the point where you find the Ferguson, you find the guy that the pockets were likely was great last year, because of an injury. So you have to be a little bit a little bit lucky, but I don't think it's as awful as you're making it out to be.
The other thing is what you were saying, Adam, about, oh no, I don't feel good about Tyler Conklin. Like if we think a guy is going to be around tight end 12, that's 9 to 10 fantasy points a game.
Right. I'm not sure he's going to be. Oh, okay. Yeah. Go ahead. Keep going.
It's like not. It's so a fallback option that scores 8 per game stinks, but it's not much of a difference. It's not that hard to be a fallback option at tight end.
Yeah.
Because the bar's really low. I wouldn't be surprised. In fact, I kind of expect Evan Ingram's probably going to fall back into that 11 to 12 range this year, as long as Christian Kirk stays healthy. We think David Njoku is going to take a little step back. Well, there were only 7 guys last year who scored more than 11 fantasy points per game, and those were 2 of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's weird that people that feel like Christian Kirk's presence really hurt Evan Ingram, but Calvin Ridley's absence won't help. And I understand what you're saying.
I come out on that side.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. What you're going to say is that middle of the field. But I just think I couldn't really necessarily think of a tight end example, but I thought about Jaden Reed and Christian Watson, right? Where Jaden Reed is in the slot 75% of the time. Evan Ingram's in the slot 45% of the time. And Jaden Reed did not get targeted when Christian Watson was on the field. Calvin Ridley had the second most end zone targets in the NFL, was a primary target when he was healthy. I know that I can't. How could Ingram not pick up some of the slack from Calvin Ridley?
Yeah, I just don't think he's going to be targeted in any of the same places that Ridley was. I know the red zone thing, but Evan Ingram hasn't scored more than 4 touchdowns in a season since he was on the Juggernaut Giants back in 2017. He's not a guy that anybody targets in the red zone.
Yeah, he's been top 10 per game. Let me just see. Top 10 tight end per game in 5 of 7 seasons.
Yeah, but generally in that 11-point range.
Yeah, I would anticipate, barring one of these guys either having an injury on their team or something dramatically changing, which in the case would be Pitts, Ingram, and Kittle, kind of living in that 11 to 12 point per game range. I mean, Kittle was there last year, and we know what his targets are when everybody's healthy. Ingram, yes, he probably should fall back to that range, which is kind of where he was living before Kirk got hurt.
I wonder if his ADOT will go up, because you're right, Heath. He didn't really Ingram was not used like Calvin Ridley. Obviously, he has a very, very low ADOT.
But what if Kirk is used like Ridley? That's the thing.
They said they want to get Ingram involved more downfield. Anywho, let's get back to the overall questions here. Who do you guys see yourself drafting the most these days at tight end?
Trey McBride.
I draft a lot of Kincaid.
How early should Sam LaPorta or Travis Kelce go?
Back end of round 2.
Back in around 3.
Wow, that's a pretty big difference there. Why are you guys a round apart on those guys?
Well,
Jamie? Okay, Heath. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm saying Jamie said that, but Jamie's not drafting those guys at the back end of round 2.
Correct.
When would you draft them?
When would I draft them?
Yeah, the top two guys, LaPorta and Kelce.
I would probably I probably wouldn't draft them.
Okay.
Because like I agree with Heath. Like I'm just going to take the bargain on one of the top four. I can make an argument for all four of those guys to be tight end one.
So which tier do you think has the best value right now? If we separate them into ADP tiers, which would be Kelce and LaPorta going at right around the 2-3 turn, Andrews, McBride, and I have to put Kincaid in there too because they're all going in round 5. Like Andrews is the first, then he's 4 or 5 turn. McBride, Kincaid, these are around 4 or 5 guys. So that's tier 2, I'd say. Kittle, Pitts, Ingram would be tier 3. Of those 3 tiers, which tier do you think has the best draft value?
I mean, it's always going to be the last one, but probably the second one.
Yeah, Andrews, McBride.
It's not always going to be the last one. If you think there's a huge difference,
value, it's always going to be the last one.
No, it's not. That's not true. Not if Andrews is 3 points better per game than Kyle Pitts and he's going a round and a half earlier, then he's a better value. Like if Kelce gets back to 16, he was at 14.7. If he gets to 16 points per game, Travis Kelce was the number 1 tight end per game with 5 touchdown catches last year. If he gets 10 touchdown catches and he's going in the 3rd round, he's going to be the best value.
If he gets 10 touchdown catches and loses elsewhere, though, are you comfortable with that?
I don't know why he would necessarily lose elsewhere.
Well, I mean, he's coming off, first sub 1,000-yard season in how many years, and his playing time was the lowest.
Right, that's what I mean. Is he really going to lose from 984 yards?
Well, if they do what they're talking about, which is limited snaps more, like it's got to come from somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know.
You can't look. I mean, it's just a math problem. Like you can't add all these other guys and reduce his playing time and expect him to still be the same player.
If they reduce his playing time,
happen, but it's just a little difficult to expect it.
If they add all the other guys, like the other guys don't really bother me because he's Kelce and he's their guy, right? It's never really mattered who's been on the field. He's the man. He's their tight end. And he could lose some production, but I think he'll gain it back in touchdowns. Because Mahomes,
I hope so. I mean, clearly he's being drafted as either 1 or 1A.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's not. But it's not always the latest guy who's the best value.
And I will say, I don't have Kelce as 1 or 2.
You have.
I've got him as 4 of the group, just because of those concerns.
Okay. How important? I guess I've sort of answered this, but how important is it to have a top 8 tight end?
Not near as important as it is to have a top 4 tight end.
I don't think it's as important as it probably feels like, so I think once you get past those 8 guys, look, Ferguson is not going to make you feel like you got a league winner.
No. Bowers,
at least right now, is not going to make you feel like you got a league winner.
Okay.
So, but if you're telling me that there's the chance of Bowers performing in that 10 to 11 point range, which I think he's capable of, Njoku still, maintaining some level of high end production, not to the extent we saw last year with Flacco, but good enough. Somebody's going to emerge. How many guys did we not expect to be top 12 tight ends finish in the top 12 last year?
Yeah, I mean, it happens all the time. Per game, you mean, or overall? Because finishing as if you finish overall as tight end 10, you probably didn't have a very good season.
But you could have been terrible at tight end and then either picked up McBride or Likely and won your league.
And that's like the McBride thing is when you're looking at last year's numbers, and he's the one that sticks out. So maybe I should say tight end 9 instead of tight end 8. But Cole Kmet was that guy last year at 10.9, and I don't think that really matters at all.
Yeah. All right. So do you feel like after the top 8, which would be, according to ADP, Kelce, LaPorta, Andrews, McBride, Kincaid, Kittle, Pitts, Ingram, do you think after that we're pretty unlikely to get a true standout? Like a stud?
I don't know if I agree with that, though, because, again,
well, it wasn't my opinion. I was just asking a question.
I do think that we will have 1 or 2 guys leapfrog those other players.
You didn't say Ferguson, right?
I did not say Ferguson.
Yeah, I could see Ferguson, or like Njoku could still do it. What if Mari Cooper at 30 years old has an injury or something, or Deshaun Watson does, and they go back to their tight end centric offense?
Well, I mean, look at the guys that we're talking about here. So Kmet really wasn't an injury related thing. likely was definitely an injury related thing, and how he finished, it was based on Andrews missing from week 11 on. So you got, 4 or 5 games of just amazing production that help you win your league. McBride was from week 6 on, where he was tight end 1 based on his points per game over that stretch, just by comparison to the league totals, the season totals. There's going to be a couple guys that just, Tucker Kraft was somebody people were starting because Luke Musgrave got hurt.
Yeah, I get it, but nobody won their league because of Tucker Kraft. Nobody won their league because of Cole Kmet. I'm like McBride and Likely, they were better, especially McBride.
Well, if we're going to go that route, LaPorta.
Yeah, yes, LaPorta. LaPorta would be the guy. I don't know that. We were excited about LaPorta. We were excited about Kincaid last year because they were walking into good situations. We're not feeling that way about Ben Sinnott. Maybe Brock Bowers could be that guy because he's that good. But all right, so all right, that's fine. I wasn't saying that I did feel that way. I think Bowers obviously has the talent to have a huge year. I just hope it plays out that way. And then does your strategy change at all in different formats? Other than
premium,
tight end premium. I know tight end premium, obviously. Other than tight end premium, does your strategy change at all in different formats?
In non-PPR and depending on the guy in half PPR, lean a little bit more toward the guys that I expect to score more touchdowns.
And in 10-team leagues, I'm more interested to reach for one of the top 4.
And in 2 receiver leagues, I'm more inclined to prioritize tight end than in 3 receiver leagues and super flex too. Super flex, if it's like a super flex 3 receiver league, I don't know if any of you play in that. I'm not going to care as much about tight end. I'm not sure if other people are on board with that, but that's just my thinking. Because my thing is tight ends are typically valuable because of how they compare to the rest of their position. When you start adding so many points in a super flex PPR 3 receiver league, they're just not going to make that big of an impact on your fantasy team.
I think that's true, except for the top 4.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, let's do sleepers, breakouts, and busts. My favorite sleeper tight end is blank. Jamie.
Well, we already said Freiermuth, so that's going to be the guy for both of us. I'll go back to Conklin. Again, he's somebody that I take very late if I don't get one of my top 8 guys. So if I miss on the position and I'm looking for somebody to pair with a Bowers or a Njoku, not necessarily Freiermuth. I think he's okay to start the season on his own, but I just feel like he's going to give you a decent floor. And if the touchdowns somehow increase, so if Rodgers can be a 30 to 35 touchdown guy, I don't think that's all going to Garrett Wilson. It's going to be dispersed amongst the group. And I think that we could see Conklin with a 6 or 7 touchdown type of year. So not the sexiest of players, but I think we're looking at I'm going to bump up his targets a little bit, somewhere between 90 and 100. Not a huge amount, but a little bit over the consistent 87, just because better quarterback play. And so I think Conklin will have a little bit of surprise season that will be a streaming option that people can look at.
So I actually prepared for the show and wrote Freiermuth or Goedert in this question. And then we talked about both of them at the top of the show because Adam basically asked the question twice. So I will say if I have to add another one, it's probably Dalton Schultz, just because if CJ Stroud has a big season, Schultz could be the second option in the red zone. And he could have one of those weird years where he only has like 650 yards, but scores 8 to 10 touchdowns and finishes as a top 10 guy.
Yeah, all right. He was he's been number 11 per game 2 straight seasons. So that's pretty good.
He is. I was looking today. He is one of 7 tight ends or 8 tight ends when you look at the 3-year average in our leagues that have averaged double-digit fantasy points over the last 3 years.
Way to go, Dalton Schultz. All right, so Jamie, would you take Tyler Conklin over? There's a couple other names that I've heard people throw about as sleepers. Noah Fant for Seattle, Colby Parkinson for the Rams.
I would, yes.
Okay. All right, so Pat Freiermuth is really the answer there at sleeper. We also like Dallas Goedert, Tyler Conklin, and Dalton Schultz. Favorite break?
And Ferguson has kind of priced himself out of being a sleeper.
Yes, I am seeing that too. I'm a little disappointed in that. He was always such good value, but now he's firmly like tight end 9 and going in round 8, Jake Ferguson, according to Draft Sharks ADP. Okay, Heath, my favorite breakout tight end is blank.
Well, I'm going to say Trey McBride. Because while he did kind of break out in the second half of last season, I do think he can be more efficient with Kyler Murray at full strength, not coming off of the ACL. And I do think we'll see a higher touchdown rate. I don't really buy into the idea that, I've got Marvin Harrison. I took him wide receiver 6 or 7 as like pick 13 in the pick by picks. This is not an anti-Marvin Harrison thing. I just don't see why Harrison can't see 9 to 10 targets per game and Kincaid and McBride sees 7 to 8 and have increased efficiency over last year. Only had 3 touchdowns on 106 targets. I'd expect he's going to score at least 6 this year and be right in the mix for the number 1 tight end.
I think we should talk about that. I mean, having McBride as your number 1 tight end is fairly bold. And in his last 10 games, he was on pace for 112 catches, 1,114 yards, 5 touchdowns on 144 targets. Kyler Murray played in 8 of those games, and he averaged just 225 passing yards per game, which is pretty low by Kyler Murray's standards. Actually, if you remember, we did the tight end tiers show a few weeks ago, and I started the show by saying, a lot of these guys that were drafting early, I think could have better offenses this year than they had last year.
Right.
I think the Chiefs will be better. Maybe the Lions because of their schedule. And actually, if you look at Sam LaPorta, he scored all 10 of his touchdowns in 11 indoor games. He did not have a single touchdown in an outdoor game or a retractable roof game. He also averaged like 10 more yards per game indoors. So you've got those two. You've got, the Ravens, I don't know. They could throw more. That's probably how that would be their path. But the Cardinals should definitely have a better offense. Not so much the Bills. But who was I missing there? There was one other guy in that mix that was going to benefit from that. Sorry, blanking.
Benefit from throwing more?
Or just having a better offense. Like we expect the Chiefs to certainly be better. Who's? All right.
You said Pitts?
Falcons.
Oh, the Falcons. Thank you. There it is. The Falcons are the big one there.
And I think the other thing is I talk about tight end buckets and wide receiver buckets in offenses and why I don't worry so much about a receiver coming or leaving and impacting the tight end that much. Like Drew Petzing comes from the Kevin Stefanski tree, and that is a tight end centric offense. We saw it several times last year. Like McBride had the same ADOT that Dalton Kincaid did last year. They were both at 6. A lot of that was influenced by the fact they dropped back and nobody's open. They weren't necessarily always dumping it off to a running back like teams do. They're dumping it off to Trey McBride in the flat with nobody around him. And he did some pretty great things after the catch at times last year. So I don't think he's going to have 144 targets, but I wouldn't be surprised if he has 130.
There's also it wasn't just McBride. It was Josh Dobbs to Zach Ertz in the first 5 games. So it was pretty consistent with the quarterback and tight end. Clearly, you take the combo of Murray and McBride over Dobbs and Ertz. So there's a lot to love about this. Yeah, I never understand this argument from Dave, and I don't want to say anything that because he's not here to defend it. But you said it. I don't. McBride averaged 8.5 targets per game in the stretch of week 6 on, and it was basically the same with Kyler Murray or without Kyler Murray. So I don't see him going from 8.5 to 6. Like it feels like you shave off a target or a half a target per game.
I think touchdowns are really my only concern for him.
It's a definite concern, and that was to your question about format. Like I have McBride over Andrews, so he's my 3rd tight end in PPR. In non-PPR, I take Andrews. I think he's going to score more.
About half.
I'll still take McBride.
Okay, Jamie, who's your favorite breakout this year?
It's Kincaid. Again, 241 targets absent from this offense. I think this is where we're going to see Josh Allen win. You go back to Sean McDermott, and basically from the offseason on, even I think before Diggs was officially gone, he was talking about the wide receiver room, and he was like, we're including our tight ends in there. And yes, Dawson Knox is going to be a problem, maybe from a touchdown red zone perspective, but I just think with the way Josh Allen is going to operate and how Joe Brady's offense is going to operate and who's the best pass catcher right now, maybe it's Keon Coleman by the end of the season, but I think we're going to see a lot of different things for Dalton Kincaid to do. So build off of what he did last year from a target and catch perspective, but be a little bit more explosive and show off a little bit of his athleticism and just be used a little bit differently. So like I said, he's the guy I have the most exposure to at the position. If I miss on that, that's fine. But I would not be shocked if he's if he leads the team in targets this year.
So you say Kincaid, Heath has McBride as his favorite breakout. Well, I'll ask you about Pitts in a second, but how is it that you have more exposure to Kincaid than McBride? Is it just a round difference, basically?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to take McBride over Kincaid. So again, I'll go back to the pick by pick. I took both those guys in round 5. So I took McBride on the 4-5 turn because I had pick 1. So if you want to say round 4 to give him the bump up, I just waited to round 5. And then Kincaid was somebody that I wanted to draft because of how I built that team, which again was 0 RB.
And in our drafts, like I know if you look at ADP, McBride and Kincaid are pretty close. But for the most part, you can count on the fact that you can just wait until the first 4 are gone, and then your next pick you can take Kincaid, and he's probably going to be there. You look at our ADP, McBride's 48th overall in terms of rank, and Kincaid's 52nd. So it's a little bit closer, I think, than it is in our drafts, but it is easier to draft Kincaid than it is McBride.
I'm going to guess that because I know there's another person I was talking to recently that feels like Heath, which McBride is tight end 1, and it's not a bad opinion at all based on how he performed last year. I'm going to guess there's probably going to be every 3rd or 4th league that somebody reaches for McBride, and again, not a bad thing, just because if you have that belief, you're going to want to make sure you get your guy. So if you're on an end, it's late round 3, early round 4, he may go in that range.
Let me tell you this. Let's just say you wanted to spend those 2 picks in rounds 4 and 5 on a tight end and a wide receiver. And let's say you were up in round 4 and you said, I can't get McBride in round 5, but I think I can get Kincaid. Well, I'm looking at 2 different sources of ADP, Fantasy Pros and Draft Sharks. And in both of them, George Pickens and T. Higgins are available in round 5, like this 5-6 turn. So if you were looking at your board and you felt like you could get Cooper or Higgins or Pickens in round 5, wouldn't you then take McBride in round 4?
Yes. I mean, if you tell me I get McBride and Pickens, sign me up all day.
If you think that McBride and Kincaid are in the same tier or are close, then you absolutely should. I've got a pretty big difference. Like I'm taking Trey McBride in the 4th because everybody else is taking LaPorta and Kelce first. I value McBride as a 3rd round pick, so I wouldn't want to pass on a 3rd round pick in round 4 to take a guy that I actually think is a 6th or 7th round pick in round 5. But if you think that those 2 are really close, then that strategy makes perfect sense.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at our CBS ADP and it's like, here are the round 5 wide receivers. Metcalf, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle somehow, T. Higgins, Tank Dell.
So you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, so you can take, if you want to take McBride, let's see where McBride's going in CBS ADP. He's going 34th overall. All right, so obviously we're taking the tight ends a little bit earlier, but he's going ahead of LaPorta. Wow, 35th. Heath, is this all this is like one Heath Cummings draft? Is it populating our ADP? No.
What's that?
The CBS ADP, because McBride was going ahead of LaPorta. Just a joke.
Are you looking at non-PPR?
Right.
No, you're looking at non-PPR, I think.
Okay. Yeah, it clicked PPR. It didn't toggle over. Okay, I'm sorry. McBride's going 52nd. And in that round, we still have Pickens and Cooper and Higgins.
And that's another thing is like when we say these numbers, I just said 48th like 10 minutes ago, but Adam wasn't listening when I was talking about ADP and gave the ADP for each of the top 5 guys, I think. But do you like he is the 48th highest ADP?
Yes.
So if those first, like he has an average of 53, there's only 17 players right now. And it kind of shows what we've talked about with that back end of round 2 problem. Mm-hmm. There's only 17 players who have a top 24 ADP.
All right. Yes. Okay. So summing it all up, looking at the wide receivers that are available in round 5, that trio of Higgins, Cooper, and Pickens are all available in 3 different websites that I just looked at, like almost into round 6. And if you are deciding between McBride, Andrews, Kincaid, and you think maybe one of them will be available in round 5, well, maybe just take your favorite one in round 4. And because those 3 receivers that I'm talking about, like we'll take them, especially Pickens, and for me, Higgins, we'll take them in round 4. I think they're steals in round 5. So that can afford you the opportunity to lock in that tight end, not take any chances. And if you want one of the top 4 or 5 tight ends, you can do it in round 4. And
I think it also depends on where you are in the round too. If you're in the middle, it's a little bit tougher to play that game.
But that's what I'm saying. Right? If you're in the middle and all 3 of those tight ends are there, you certainly don't know that one of them is going to make it back to you. So you should probably lock them up in round 4.
Sure, but there's also the potential of what did teams 1, 2, and 3 do? Let's just say your pick 4 or 5.
Okay, they might have LaPorta and Kelce at that point, right, which would help you. And also, is it a 2 receiver or a 3 receiver league? Because that could determine which position's about to go on a run.
Sure.
I've kind of deviated from the from the topic here, the tight end position. So we'll take a break, and when we come back, you'll give us a bust, and then we'll go through ADP, talk about all these guys right after this on FFT.
Never before seen matches and new rivalries unlocked.
Trust me, we're just getting started.
The Summer Cup is here. Let these games begin.
Let's get a tight end bust right now. We'll start with Heath. Heath, blank will be a bust.
I am going to say, based on CBS ADP, that it's Travis Kelce.
Yesterday was Josh Allen. Today it's Travis Kelce.
Well, that's the thing about being a bust. Like, nobody's going to be drafting crappy players in round 2 or round 3. And you can't really be a bust if you're being drafted late in the draft. So I don't think, like, Kelce's the 21st person off the board with an ADP of 27. Sam LaPorta's 34th. Mark Andrews 39th. Trey McBride's 48th. That's a huge difference in where they're being drafted. I don't think that they're just going to go back to Travis Kelce playing all of the snaps all regular season, because why would they? He's going to be 35 years old in October. They're going to be playing in late January, and they need him to be 100%. They've got Marquise Brown and Xavier Worthy now. He probably needs the touchdowns to bounce back just to be in the top 4.
Yeah, it's a pretty convincing case. Okay, Jamie, who's a bust for you?
I'm going to go a little bit lower. Now, I'm curious to see where Kittle's ADP ends up because, again, his points per game have just declined. Now, it's kind of like a floating bust, if you will, because if Ayuk is going to be a hold in through the entire training camp, then that makes me a little bit more excited about Kittle. But when everybody's healthy, he's tough to trust. But I'll take the low hanging fruit and say Njoku. He was amazing with Flacco, and he was so at best with Watson. And so Watson's return on top of his injury, on top of the addition of Jerry Jeudy, just another mouth to feed. I don't have Njoku as anybody I want to draft as a starter.
Number 6 tight end per game last year, scored double-digit PPR fantasy points in 11 of his last 12 games, including the playoffs. And yeah, he was amazing with Flacco. He was not so good with Deshaun Watson. Watson was targeting Elijah Moore a lot in the 5 games that he played and finished. And now that could be Jerry Jeudy. So, okay. Njoku is Jamie's answer. For Heath, it was Travis Kelce. So let's go to ADP review, and I'll ask you about these guys. And at basically the 2-3 turn or early into round 3, we have Kelce and LaPorta going. We've done so many drafts. I've seen these guys go mid round 2 to late round 3, basically. I'm not sure how often I've seen them sneak into round 4, but let's say they're around the 2-3 turn approximately. Kelce and LaPorta. Who do you guys prefer?
LaPorta.
I prefer LaPorta to Kelce, but I'm not drafting either one of them as tight end 1.
And they're back to back for me, so I don't have a strong preference. If you tell me that LaPorta goes and I want to take a tight end, I'm taking Kelce without hesitation.
Do you think there's another level for Sam LaPorta to reach?
Yes, touchdowns stayed the same and the catches and yards go up.
Yeah, I think, and I like more likely, and nobody will be surprised when I say this, the touchdowns are probably going to regress a little bit. And so he needs to reach a new level to justify where he's being drafted. He's being drafted to reach another level. Like his catches and yards were not good enough last year to be drafted here.
Right, but you are talking about that as a rookie tight end.
Right.
Typically when these guys break out, it's year 2. 60+ targets available. We're all looking at Jameson Williams and saying those go to him, but what if it's, just Jared Goff and concentrating targets on those 2 guys, St. Brown and LaPorta a little bit more? Wouldn't be surprising.
Yeah, he could.
Okay. So LaPorta averaged around 14 points per game last year. Kelce was a little bit closer to 15. I think he was at 14.7. Hawkinson was tied with Kelce. We haven't even said TJ Hawkinson's name. I would almost nominate him as a bust.
If he's being drafted as a starter, yes, but I don't think anybody's going to draft him as a starter.
Yeah, I was going to say,
we get closer to real drafts with the still be on the pup list.
He has a round 9 ADP right now. It's just like,
yeah,
isn't that worth taking the shot that TJ Hawkinson is TJ Hawkinson in the second half of the year?
Not for me.
That actually feels a little early. He's round 10 on Draft Sharks. You're saying he's round 9 on CBS?
99th pick.
Yeah. I don't know. There's some good players. There's some really good players. I'd rather have like JSN. He goes around there. I'd rather have Jamison Williams than TJ Hawkinson.
It's I think a different conversation if you have a IR spot, which most leagues do. So that certainly helps. But like, what are you expecting from him even when he returns? You know, I mean, it's still suspect quarterback play, guy coming off that type of injury. You can still be that type of player.
Okay. So, all right, Jamie, I think give me a little fist bump there for the TJ. Thank you, buddy. Thank you for your support. All right. So the next group is Andrews at the 4-5 turn, Trey McBride round 5, Dalton Kincaid round 5. Does Dalton Kincaid belong in that discussion with Andrews and McBride?
I think there's a tier break, but again, if you think he's going to have a big season like I do, like I don't have a problem taking him round 5. I just think the other guy should go a little bit sooner.
Yeah, I think Andrews and McBride should be in round 4 and Kincaid should be in round 6.
All right, let's talk about Andrews. He did see his targets go down. His 17-game pace, if you remove week 11, when he got hurt and he played only 11% of the snaps, his 17-game pace was 81 catches, 984 yards, 11 touchdowns on 111 targets. Is that enough? Does he need more than 111 targets to be worth a round 4 or 5 pick, early round 5?
That's basically Sam LaPorta last year. Like it's kind of the same thing as like Andrews probably needs more targets and catches to justify not a round 5 pick. He would to finish as tight end 1 or to justify a round 3 pick. But no, if you give me those numbers that you just said for Mark Andrews in round 5, I think you feel great about it.
See, I think maybe it's resetting expectations. Like, Adam, do you expect somebody to be in the 16-point per game range this year?
Hopeful for Kelce, but probably not.
See, I'm anticipating 14 to 15 being the best tight end, and
that's very low, by the way. Last year was the lowest for tight end 1 per. It's just like what I said about Josh Allen, except not as bad. I think 2017 was the last time Jordan Reed. 2016 or 17 is the last time tight end 1 was as bad per game as Travis Kelce.
I don't know if you have it in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
How many guys were near Kelce? Because usually it's maybe 1.
Yeah. So Hawkinson was 1/10 of a point behind him.
No. I'm not talking about last year. I'm talking about the elite years for him and Gronk and those guys.
Well, I can tell you how many guys have averaged. We usually have 3 to 4 who average 14 per game. Last year there were 2.
Right.
And,
well, you say that though, but McBride was right there during his stretch, and it was a pretty significant stretch. So I'll put him in that group. Andrews was right there, so that's I guess that my anticipation, like going back to what he said about tight end feeling deep. Like I wouldn't be surprised if there's 4 or 5 guys that are in the 14-point per game range.
Right.
But nobody getting like significantly better than that. Like
I don't have anybody projected for 15.
Right.
Yeah. So Andrews, okay, I love
Andrews.
Andrews.
If Andrews gets to 14 points per game, that's what I'm saying. He's in the discussion to be the best tight end.
I think I have an easier case making the downside call for Andrews than the upside call for Andrews. He's had only 1 year in his career, even if you remove games he's left with injury, 1 year in his career where he's averaged more than 60 yards per game. It just doesn't feel like he could ever get back to what he was when he was tight end 1 because they threw the ball so much that year, for the Ravens. I think they were like 9th in pass attempts. Is likely going to be a factor? Is Rashad Bateman going to be a factor? I don't really worry about Derrick Henry because they've always been a team that's had a lot of running back rushing touchdowns. And it's not like Henry's catching the ball. But if Flowers develops into a receiver that Marquise Brown never could be, if Bateman finally shows up like we keep hearing about, if Likely's really going to be on the field that much, am I overblowing it, or is this a legit concern for Mark Andrews?
I think you're overblowing it.
I don't think it's a legit concern, but it's a concern. I mean,
illegitimate concern. Okay, fair.
It's something to, when you're talking about comparing the top 4 guys, because again, I would still draft Andrews over Kincaid, so that's 4 and 5 for me. If you're comparing Andrews to the 3 guys in front of him, then you're nitpicking clearly who you think is better. And so I think to compare him to McBride is fair because, well, McBride's touchdowns negate the lack of reception or the reception difference, the reception total difference between him and Andrews. Yeah. If things, hold to form based on last year.
It's hard to ignore it though. Like I said, for Andrews, 5 straight seasons as a top 5 tight end per game in full PPR, and in non-and-half PPR, he's been top 3 per game in 4 of the last 5 seasons.
And they're going to see so many stacked boxes because of Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. So it's just going to be a lot of single coverage, safeties, linebackers. Like, he's got an opportunity to really eat. And so there's a lot to love about Andrew's situation. Again, unless you're concerned about other targets taking away those opportunities.
All right, Heath, you haven't been on this show coming off as super high on Dalton Kincaid. Do you have anyone ahead of him, or is he tight end 5 for you?
Kittle.
Okay. And Jamie has Kincaid as tight end 5, and he drafts him a lot. So I think the next tier is so fascinating to me. George Kittle, Evan Ingram, Kyle Pitts. I'm a little afraid of this tier, but I see the fun in it for sure.
And the Kittle thing, probably, like, this is a Tyler Lockett, whatever other guy you want to put in that category. Kind of like, if you're one of those people who values consistency or who thinks that's a thing that's predictable year over year, then Kittle's probably not your kind of guy. He had, and it, like, LaPorta was kind of that guy too last year. He had a bunch of really bad games, but there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games last year where George Kittle had 30 yards or fewer. There were also probably about that many where he just won you the week. This
is unbelievable, Heath. Over the last 3 seasons, George Kittle has played 54 games, including the playoffs. He has 40 or fewer yards in 28 of those 54 games. He has 70 or more yards in 20 games. So that means in 54 games over 3 seasons, George Kittle has 6 games where he's been anywhere between 41 and 69 yards. That's mind-blowing to me.
It is. And you just have to decide if you like that or if you don't like that. Like, I look at the tight end position and figure half the league's going to be at around 9, 10, 11 points. And so, like, the weeks that George Kittle scores me 4, it stinks. But the weeks that he scores me 25, it's a huge, huge deal. It's just a bigger deal to me. But if you value consistency, Kittle's probably not your guy.
And I think for Kittle and Goedert, for example, we talked about this with Devontae Smith with the conversation with Dave. There's an injury away from them being potentially the best tight end in football.
Yeah. Right. Kittle just goes crazy whenever Debo's out. Ayuk never misses games. But how about Kyle Pitts? All right. Look, Kyle Pitts played through a knee injury, was not himself last year. He had 1,000 yards as a rookie. We like Drake London to varying degrees here. Kyle Pitts, Jamie, do you like him this year? Are you feeling it this year? Do you draft Kyle Pitts?
I do. Again, I think it depends on who you're drafting with and how the board is played. So if you're in the miss on the top 5 guys, then you got to say, okay, is this going to be a draft? Like, I know we draft with Thomas a lot. Thomas tends to take Kyle Pitts, and correct me if I'm wrong, Thomas. It just feels like that's the case. But I like the potential of what he can be. I'm gonna fall for the dangling carrot in front of me every time when I see what this guy's capable of doing, and now getting a quarterback and an offense upgrade. And I say offense upgrade, which is hard to really qualify. Hard to really explain. With what Arthur Smith did with his tight ends, 34% of the targets went to the tight ends last year. Unfortunately, there were just 2 of them, and Jonnu Smith was outplaying Kyle Pitts for a good portion of the season. So, the things that I like, you mentioned it, being healthy, I think motivated because he's getting to the point where, his 5th-year option is going to come up. This is year 4 for him. Arthur Smith told me something last year when I talked to him in regards to the offense. And it was basically, when we had Matt Ryan, I trusted the passing game more. And he came across as, I don't trust my passing game with the quarterbacks that I have.
Shocking.
Understandable.
Yeah.
And I think with a veteran quarterback coming in, there's the potential of Kyle Pitts getting the opportunities and the targets and the catchable passes and everything that he needs to get back to being that guy that we saw as a rookie that can be an elite level player. So I'll buy it. And again, if I miss, I miss. But if he hits, my goodness, he could be the best tight end in fantasy.
And lots of people are just going to say Kyle Pitts has burned me too many times. I'm not going to do this. but you're going to feel a lot more dumb if he burns you 2 years in a row in round 3. And so you don't take him at the 6-7 turn. And this is the year that he hits. Like the value is a lot better. Johnny rightly brings up that Kyle Pitts is still just 24 years old.
Yeah.
He's still like tight ends take a while sometimes, and he's in terrible circumstances, and his circumstances are a lot better.
You know, it reminds me a little bit of Joe Mixon a few years ago. This is a weird comparison, but I remember Joe Mixon couldn't stay healthy. And I remember a lot of people going, I put up a Twitter poll, would you rather have Antonio Gibson or Joe Mixon? And a lot of people said Gibson because they had been burned by Mixon too much in the past. And they missed out on a very, very good, maybe the best Joe Mixon season. So, you know, don't hate someone because of what's happened in the past to your fantasy team. He didn't do it on purpose. You know, you got to be able to get over it. I got to say, like, we should talk about Evan Ingram and our expectations here for him. It's funny because, like, I do think he's going to pick up the slack for Calvin Ridley, some of that, but I also have a hard time seeing him, you know, leading the position in targets again and having over 130. It just seems like too much. But I want to get in this tier a little bit more because after that, you know, I'm fine with Jake Ferguson, but I'm not super excited about Jake Ferguson. I don't know why I haven't really been able to do that. I think because we play in so many 3-receiver leagues, and at this point, I don't want to have a bad 4th receiver or something like that, or maybe a bad 3rd receiver. But if I'm playing in a 2-receiver league, I personally want to make sure that I have one of the top 8. You know, I would like that. Certainly I'm fine with other options after that, but I wouldn't mind being in the top 8. And I
have a hard time with Ingram not being second on team targets. So to what level he drops, he's going to drop. But to what level he drops is where I think you have to feel comfortable drafting him or not. Because
in full PPR, Jamie, he's been, I don't know if I said this, he's been top 8 in all but 2 of his NFL seasons per game. That's impressive.
And certainly the 2 with Lawrence. And, you know, again, it's kind of similar to Heath's argument about Kittle. Like, there's going to be some stretches where Ingram's not going to be good. You know, he was allergic to the end zone to start the season. You said it, Heath. You know, he doesn't score a lot of touchdowns. There was a game I remember on the broadcast. You know, so quickly you get the meetings with the coaches, the coaches, the players, coaches and certain players meet with the broadcast team before games, and they take a lot of notes about things that they're trying to accomplish. And I remember that there was a Jaguars game where Ingram hadn't scored yet.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, they're trying, they really want to get him in the end zone. And it was like 4 or 5 end zone targets. It felt like, you know, I'm sure I'm off on that number, but in any event, they were making a concerted effort to try and get him into the end zone and to catch a touchdown. And so I don't think we're going to see that to that degree again, but can you really anticipate Brian Thomas being the second guy in targets to start the season? Maybe by the end of the season, but start the season. I don't see Gabe Davis being that guy either.
Yeah, it's so hard because, like, last year, and I think we've talked probably enough about the difference when Kirk was there and when he wasn't, but it was a massive difference in terms of the number of targets per game. And the year before, he was on a team with Kirk and Zay Jones and Marvin Jones, and Zay Jones played 1 fewer game and had 23 more targets than he did.
But Ingram was still on pace for 127 targets in the first 11 games of the season. And that was with Ridley and Kirk. That still would that have led the position? I think that may have been 127.
It might have. That brings up the next point. Is there, like, and I think Evan Ingram's going to be a top 8 tight end. I just think he's probably going to be 6 through 8. Very few players have been worse at turning targets and catches into yards and touchdowns. His yards per target last year was 6.7, which is abysmal, and it's 6.8 for his career. He's got 24 touchdowns on 670 career targets.
So could we call Evan Ingram the safe play in that tier?
In full PPR only.
Okay. He's still been top 10 per game in all but 2 seasons in the other formats, but he's been top 8 per game in all but 2 seasons in full PPR. All right. How about this question real quick here? Kyle Pitts. Does Kyle Pitts have as much upside as any tight end in the NFL?
Upside? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure we said that. After that, we have Jake Ferguson and Brock Bowers. Jake Ferguson, David Njoku, Brock Bowers, Dallas Goedert. That's our top 12. That's 9 through 12. Ferguson, Njoku, Bowers, Goedert. Is Ferguson easily the top choice for you guys there?
Yes.
does he have another gear to reach? Because he really didn't have that good of a year. I mean, I think he had less than 800 yards in 17 games. He just was like kind of fine. And then he had a 3 touchdown game in the playoffs, which I love. But he was tight end 10 per game. Does he have an extra gear, Jake Ferguson?
Yes. I mean, again, you reference this quite a bit, the playoff game, where he had 3 touchdowns. That's not realistic, but the targets and catches were there for him. So, he's easy to peg as the second person to get targets, second most likely to get targets for the Cowboys. I know Brandon Cooks and Jalen Tolbert's having apparently a fantastic camp, but my goodness, there's an opportunity here for him just to be a better version of Jason Witten and Dalton Schultz. And if that were to happen, he could be a superstar. I don't see it, but it could.
Well, and we talk a lot about Lamb's finish to the season. Jake Ferguson, the first 8 weeks of the year, had 3 games with 7 targets, and the rest of his games were 4, 4, 3, and 1 in terms of targets. He only played over 80% of the snaps in a couple of those games. The second half of the year, he had 4 games with 8 targets. He had a 10-target game, and then he had the game in the playoffs, Adam, where he had, you mentioned the 3 touchdowns. He also caught 10 passes for 93 yards in that game.
Yeah, 12 targets.
They went super consolidated on CeeDee Lamb, and that's been talked about a lot, but Jake Ferguson was much more involved in that second half of the season. And last 10 games, he was on pace for 117 targets. So yeah, I think he absolutely has another year, and he's still a third-year guy.
How do you guys rank Bowers, Njoku, and Goedert?
Goedert, Njoku, Bowers right now.
I'm going to make a change and put Goedert ahead of Njoku as well. I like that. I've got it right now, Njoku. No, I've got it Goedert, Njoku, Bowers. Yes.
So that means you guys are lower on Bowers than ADP because he's tight end 10 and you have him 12. So
I have him 13. I have Freiermuth at him.
Oh, wow. Okay. Heath, you?
Bowers, I have 14th.
Wow. All right. Why the Brock Bowers? I won't, not hate, but concerns.
I mean, for me, it's, the quarterback plus the guy who's still there, so Devontae Adams is going to command so many targets on a team that feels like they're going to try and run the ball more. So between Adams and still Jacoby Myers, and for what it's worth, Michael Mayer's getting a lot of love, so how much is he going to be a factor? I don't think he takes away too much from Bowers, but he's still going to be, it sounds like a piece of this offense, and maybe Trey Tucker also, who's getting some love as a deep threat. So it feels as if Bowers, I think the ceiling, and again, not bad. I think the ceiling, maybe with a couple more touchdowns, is kind of what Dalton Kincaid did last year, which, could be a borderline starter, somebody that you can, hopefully get some good production out of. And I think by the end of the season starts to pick up his play. But I'm just concerned based on the offense that he was a part of. It was my concern from draft day, the quarterback play being what it potentially could be with Adams if he's still healthy. I think that's going to be a problem for him to be a consistent starter for fantasy managers.
Yeah. All right. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Let's go on to, we talked about Goedert earlier. We've talked about Njoku. We have TJ Hawkinson, who's 13th off the board in round 10. When he comes back, do you think he'll be a top 5 tight end, TJ Hawkinson?
No.
I would say 5 to 7.
What would you say, Jamie?
10 to 15.
Just torn ACL, potentially third on the team in targets, bad quarterback play, all that stuff?
Yes.
Okay. He's more optimistic. I want to get some other guys. Dalton Schultz, he's going to need some touchdowns. Pat Freiermuth in round 11. We think that could be a steal. These guys have Freiermuth as a top 13 guy or 12 guy or something like that. And then you've got like Cole Kmet. Hey, kudos to Cole Kmet. He was a number 8 tight end last year. Good job. Things have changed quite a bit for him. Luke Musgrave, Ben Sinnott, Taysom Hill, not tight end eligible on CBS, but he's there. Hunter Henry, Tyler Conklin, Isaiah Likely. I do see people drafting Likely in, like a regular 12-team, 1 tight end league. Would you consider making him your last pick if you had Mark Andrews?
It's not awful, but I think you got to really, love your team. And, if you're playing in a 14-round league or 16, if you factor in kickers and defenses, like it's hard to justify putting him on your bench in that regard. So he would be somebody that I just, you don't have rolling waivers, and you don't have fab concerns. Like if you want to just keep picking him up prior to every week.
Why don't I do this? Why don't I give you a group of 4 tight ends, and you just tell me if any of them kind of stand out. All right, so we'll go over some of the other ones. Komet, or some of the ones we just did. Komet, Luke Musgrave, Ben Sinnott, Taysom Hill. Okay. Hunter Henry, Tyler Conklin, Isaiah Likely, Kate Otten.
Are you talking about to have I'm sorry, including the previous group, to have a starters or draft a second tight end?
It's just like, do you ever find yourself?
I don't. No, I don't.
Starters. No. Okay.
Well, I go back to what I said earlier in the show. Like if you need to draft 2 tight ends, like Hunter Henry's in that group for me. He talked about it. The Kevin Stefanski tree, Alex Van Pelt is coming from that system. And you look at this receiving core, it wouldn't be shocking if this is a guy that at the beginning of the season last year, remember, we probably went a little too nuts for what his opportunity could be when he had all those touchdowns in the first 2 weeks. But between Drake May and Jacoby Brissett, this could be one of the guys they lean on, especially in the red zone.
All right. Conklin, I know Jamie said he likes earlier. Likely, we talked about. How about Kate Otten, Chigo Okonkwo, Noah Fant, Jonnu Smith?
Noah Fant's my favorite.
Again, second tight ends with some upside. I'll throw Gesicki in there too. So, these are guys I think that you could see a path to success, but hard to necessarily envision it. Like, where's Fant's targets coming from?
Tyler Lockett.
Well, where's JSN's targets getting?
I mean, wait. So we got a completely different offense. We don't know what the target distribution
No,
is.
no, I get that. That's what I'm saying. Like, who's losing?
Yeah. All right. How about Jonnu Smith, Carolina rookie Jatavian Sanders, Mike Gesicki, and Giants rookie Theo Johnson?
Jonnu for me.
No, thank you. Like none of these guys are inside of our top 200. I don't think.
Zach Ertz, Dawson Knox, Jelani Woods, Colby Parkinson.
Zach Ertz.
I'm interested in Woods just because I want to see what he can do with Anthony Richardson.
Michael Mayer, Tucker Kraft, Juwan Johnson, Daniel Bellinger, Greg Dulcich. Well, Greg Dulcich's getting some buzz in camp. So.
Yeah, he's healthy. That's encouraging. For a quarterback that's going to dump the ball off a lot.
He could be second on the team in targets.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Greg Dulcich. Hey, we just took an hour and 8 minutes.
Behind Javonte Williams? Or Jaleel McLaughlin.
Oh, yeah, one of those guys. All right, let's wrap it up. That was tight ends. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you tomorrow with a mailbag. Some of those will be from your St. Jude donations. And just go ahead and check out tinyurl.com/draftathon 2024 and see what is available for you to purchase there to help St. Jude and to maybe get on the show. All right, we'll talk to you tomorrow on Fantasy Football Today